Yo,
Hi!
how you doing?
Oh my gosh, it's so good to see
I
you.
know it's been years.
It's been so long. Last time I saw you, your dreads were like this tall. Tall.
I know they've been growing.
They look so good.
Yeah, I guess it's. When was the last time I saw you? Was it, I guess, 2016?
It might have been.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, I'm glad we're doing this.
Same. Thank you for being a part of this Instagram Live series.
Yeah. So are you in Costa Rica right now?
Yes, I'm in Costa Rica. Um, I'm in Nosara, living the good life.
That's cool. I've never been, but I was in Costa Rica, I guess, 2 months ago, and I'm missing it quite a bit.
Oh, nice. Oh, you were in Vision, right?
Yeah,
Okay, very cool.
yeah, it was amazing.
I've heard such good things. We should do another one about that.
All right, round two. That sounds good. We can have my other buddy on as well.
Okay, great. Um, okay, well, thanks everyone for joining us. This conversation, oh, actually, I wanted to do I don't know how to do that. Well, I don't know. Okay, so this conversation is going to be about ahimsa, which is the first yama in the yamas, which are part of the eight limbs in yoga. And Nico here is an animal rights activist, a yogi, and an amazing human being. So I really just want to set the stage up for you to share a little bit about your path to yoga, starting there, like how did you find yoga, what inspired you, and then from there we'll see what happens.
Cool.
So
Well,
take it away.
hello everybody on the chat. Nice to digitally meet you. Hopefully we can meet in person at some point. So yeah, the first I'll do this intro hopefully short, and then we can get into the fun stuff.
Mm,
So I first came to yoga summer of 2013. I was working on a farm in Hawaii, which was an ashram of sorts.
mm,
Um, and so I had no idea like what I got myself into. I grew up in an atheistic family, had never done anything like spiritually related, and honestly didn't know a thing about yoga. But the experience was pretty full on. So we'd wake up at 4 a.m. every morning. We would do Agnihotra, which are fire ceremonies, chant mantra, meditate, practice pranayama, and then practice asana. And so it was like a 3 hour routine we would do every morning before breakfast. And it changed me pretty profoundly. Up until that point, I was finding pleasure and meaning in like partying and drugs. Um, and that experience on the ashram really eviscerated that interest for me and put me on a different path. So back in Colorado, after my summer on the farm, I began like exploring yoga philosophy, meaning,
mm.
and was really hungry for more. So in 2014, I went to India and was there for 6 months, and was studying yoga philosophy, comparative religions in particular, um, and was there that I really started digging into the philosophy behind the practice and the thing that has motivated me ever since.
Mm.
Um, 2000. So then I returned to the United States. A year later, I came back to India and did my teacher training, and it was in Ashtanga yoga. And it's the physical style of yoga that I really love to practice and teach now. Shortly after that, I did the Peace Corps, and from the Peace Corps, I moved to Colombia, where I was helping to manage a yoga studio down there. And so I was there for, I guess, 8 months. And so at the yoga studio, I was teaching classes. We were doing a yoga internship. So newly formed, newly educated yoga teachers would come to our studio and develop their teaching style. So I was mentoring them in that process, and helping out with teaching yoga teacher trainings. We're almost to present.
I'm
Then
here.
Okay, after that, I was hungry for more personal education. And so I went to Bali and trained with a yogi named Mark Roberts. So did an intensive with him and really dug into the philosophy and the physical practices of the system. I am currently in my parents' basement in Colorado, which is it's nice to be home, I guess. I've been living in New York City lately, doing a master's degree in what's called animal studies. So it basically looks at the relationships between human and non-human animals, and the significance of those relationships, both on humans and on other animals.
Mm.
I had to leave New York City because of COVID, and I'm finishing out my degree online. So like 2 weeks away from finishing. So that's kind of exciting.
Oh my gosh, awesome.
And I guess that brings us up to where we are now.
Wow. That was too fast. I want to go back. I want to go back and get in there a little bit more. So you came back from the Peace Corps and you were like, I want to combine what I've learned from the yogic philosophy and I want to, bring that in, like live my yoga. Um, and so you decided to go to get your master's in animal studies,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
basically. Okay.
I'm going to law school in the fall, and I'm really passionate about animal law,
Yeah.
and just about creating a world with less harm and violence in general.
Yeah.
And so the master's degree is really kind of the intellectual or philosophical foundation for my animal rights activism and motivations in the world.
Amazing. Okay, so let's just um so what is ahimsa and how does that tie into your work now? And maybe you can share more about like what you do as an animal rights activist and how you live your life and what you believe and how you're supporting other people in their activism, and like how we can collectively, create a better world through ahimsa.
Cool. So this is one of my top favorite conversations of all time. So I'm really
Yes.
excited to have it. Uh, it's how I start off a lot of my like yoga classes in like abbreviated sections. So I'm excited to dig in.
Amazing.
Before we do, I'm just gonna do like a little definitional stuff,
Please.
because I guess the way we define things will take the conversation in different ways.
Mm,
So yoga can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and there are a lot of different definitions. But what I'm going to accept the Patanjali Yoga Shastras as this
yeah.
foundational, kind of like to tie a conversation to that. So almost universally in the West, at least, basically every yoga practice roots itself in the Yoga Shastras. And so what the Yoga Shastras are the sutras and the pyasa. And those together are the philosophical foundation for the yoga practice. Within these shastras, it enumerates 3 different types of yogas. So the yoga of mental cessation, yogas chitta niti virodaha, or whatever.
Hmm.
The yoga of action, kriya yoga, and 8-limbed yoga, ashtanga yoga. So within these 3, Ashtanga yoga, and when I say that, I don't mean the physical, sweaty
Right.
vinyasa practice. I'm talking about the philosophical system. It's the foundational system for all really like Western approaches to yoga as a spiritual science. And this is kind of how you started the conversation, talking about right the yamas, the niyamas, and etc. So I won't go too deep into this because for one, it's on a different tangent. And also, I imagine a lot of people tuning in either already know what I'm talking about
Yeah.
or we don't have time to get into it. But really, so there are 8 limbs, and it's important to note that they're sequential. So the idea is that in order to get to the second, you have to get the first one down. And to make progress in the third, you have to have the second. So it's like a
Mm,
ladder of them building on top of each other. So it's not something you can kind of go shop around and say, oh, this looks good, I'm going to start over here. Really, the philosophical principle is that they build on top of each other. So yamas is the first, and yama basically means absences, things that you should not do. The second are niyamas, observances, things that you should do. All right, but within the yamas, and hopefully we'll get to the good stuff here shortly.
That's a great overview.
Okay, hopefully. Within the yamas, there are 5, and the first of the 5 is called ahimsa. Basically means non-violence, non-harm. So let me see if this can work. Cool.
Ooh, yeah.
So my first tattoo, ahimsa, right? And so himsa, this section right here, means harm. It means violence. When you add this prefix of ah to it, it negates it, right? So it's the foundational part is harm. The ah means the opposite of harm, the opposite of violence.
Thank you.
So the Yoga Shastra goes pretty in depth in this area. It really digs into what we mean by harm. So it begins by defining what motivates harm. And it says that it's either greed, anger, or delusion. And all harm comes from one of those 3 foundational principles. It then enumerates this list of harms, but basically pretty quickly says there's an infinite amount of ways we can harm people, harm things, harm animals. But the quintessential example, the archetypical example in the Shastras of harm is slaughtering animals. And so it's very explicit. It says yeah, you can do all these different little things that harm people, but the ultimate harm is the slaughter of animals. And so from this principle, from this foundation, the idea, and I'll get to this in a second, is that animal agriculture is inherently himsic. It's inherently violent. It's inherently harmful. And so the industrial system that we live with today, which creates over 99% of our animal products. So honestly, if anyone is eating animal products, it's from factory farms. That takes this level of harm and violence to another threshold, really unimaginable. But even without industrial animal agriculture, even in this nice bucolic mom and pop farming system, it's still rooted in himsa. It's still rooted in violence. And the fact that Patanjali, who wrote this 1600 years ago, used animal agriculture as it was being practiced 1600 years ago is a justification for that, right?
Totally.
All right, so now we get into the scope of ahimsa, what it's really asking us not to do.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess, is this making sense so far?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Right. Totally on board. Keep it going.
Okay. So the sutras and the Vyasa go pretty in depth into what constitutes ahimsa. And it's pretty profound in how far reaching it is. So I just pulled this little quote before this. It says, ahimsa must be adhered to constantly in all places, at all times, and towards all beings. So it's universal. It basically covers everybody and everything. And it's also unconditional. So it explicitly says that there's no way around it. There's no scenario that we can make up that justifies himsa, that justifies the killing of other animals. It's universal and it's unconditional. And it's striking because nowhere else in the Yoga Shastras is anything made unequivocally. Everything else is kind of made with some flexibility. But this is the one principle, and it's no, this is it, and there's no way around it.
Wow.
It further, and the amount of time that it spends articulating what Patanjali means by ahimsa, again, shows the importance of it, which we'll get to right after this. But it clarifies also that not only can you, the individual, not kill an animal, you cannot have the killing performed by somebody else. So not only can I not kill a pig, but I can't go to the grocery store and buy a hot dog. That is an act of himsa and is against the practice. It also holds that you can't approve or sanction an environment where killing is being carried out. So you have to be actively against any institution or environment that does killing. And this is already a lot, right? There's a lot of scholars just take this even a step further. It's called the Anumodita principle, the acceptance or consent principle. And so basically it's saying that no part of your personal actions can consent or support violence. And people say that like eating at restaurants that serve flesh, that serve animal flesh, is an act of himsa because you're actively supporting an institution who is benefiting from the violence and harm done to other animals. That last point is a little bit more contentious, so I won't go there. But I personally go there. So I personally don't eat around anybody who is consuming animals, consuming violence, and I don't eat in places of violence. So I don't eat even where places serve these kind of products. But that's not the point that I'm going to make to everybody else. Y'all can still do that if you want. We can have another conversation about that later. But it's important to emphasize here that within the Patanjala Yoga Shastra, ahimsa is the most emphasized tenet, right? And so it explicitly says that the subsequent 4 yamas and 5 niyamas are all rooted in ahimsa. So and it explicitly says that ahimsa covers them all. The enumeration after that is just to add clarification, but everything else that follows in the yamas and niyamas are rooted in ahimsa. And so why is that, right? It's like why and so if you're like me, I don't really follow rules. I'm not a big rule guy. And so if someone tells me to do something, my initial reaction is going to be like, I'm probably not going to do that. So I don't, yeah. And so when I was first reading all these texts and getting into it, that's the first thing that came to me. It's like, all right, some dude said 1600 years ago, you can't do this. Like, why? And it's not because Patanjali had like some motive about saving animals. It is deeply embedded within the philosophy of this yogic system. All right, so yoga comes from the root yog, which means to yoke, to bring together. And the principal purpose of yoga as a philosophy, as a spiritual practice, is to transcend the individual and to attain unification with a higher being. So within the yogic system, we call that Purusha, we call that Atman. Within Western traditions, you can call that God, Allah, Yahweh. The name doesn't really matter, but the idea of the yoga system is that it's a liberatory science to transcend the individual ego and to join with something greater than oneself. And with that goal, ahimsa is the biggest threat to that success, right? So to cause harm to someone else, to be violent to someone else, requires that we define that other person as something other than ourselves. The mental, to even do that, right? So, and I don't, let's see how deep I want to go. Yeah, so to cause harm to someone, to be violent to someone, necessitates that we identify them as not us, right? So the idea that I'm going to like cut off my leg and eat my leg is obviously I'm not going to do that, right? It's my leg. I'm not going to harm myself. And the reason I'm not going to do that is because I'm not going to harm myself, right? It's self-explanatory. And yet we do this to chickens. We do this to pigs. We do this to cows. And that act of violence to another, to harm another, you have to define them as other, right? You can't do that kind of violence or harm to another being without first instantiating that that's them, this is me, and there's a separateness. But that whole thing is a fallacy, right? And the goal of this yoga system is to actually experience that is a fallacy and experience the unity of all beings, right? This idea of Om. That everything is one, we are all one, and until we get to that point, that foundation, you can't attain liberation. right? So I can be balancing on one pinky in Padmasana, meditating for 24 hours in total like concentration. But if I'm still seeing everybody else as them and this is me, that doesn't matter. That's just like
Yeah.
acrobatics. It's all bullshit. The core principle of this practice is to develop our sense of unity and love for everybody else, and recognize that the other is us. And it is through practicing ahimsa, nonviolence, that we get to that point. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, I'm so on board with this.
And okay, so I'm going to take it one step further, right?
Please keep it coming.
Okay. So at this point, what I'm arguing, establishing is that according to Patanjali, according to the Yoga Shastra, and according to the whole yogic system based upon these, ahimsa is the central tenet, and to practice ahimsa, you can't kill animals, right? That is it. So to be a practicing yogi, you have to be vegan. And that's not something most yoga teachers will say in classes, because nobody fucking wants to hear that, right? That's not how you become a popular teacher, is by telling people that what you're doing is wrong, it's spiritually wrong, it's philosophically wrong, and you need to change, right? The way you build a following is to be like, yes, like be supportive.
Yeah.
And I think that's an incredibly important, and like we need that, right? But I guess what I'm here to do right now is to say what Patanjali said in the Shastras. It's like not me making shit up, right?
Yeah.
And I identify with this stuff, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it's very unequivocal in what Patanjali is saying. So that's step one. You got to be vegan. You got to stop harming others. And the animal agriculture industry is prima facie, it's violent, it is harmful. But I think it requires more of us, right? So to go back to this example, ahimsa. So himsa, violence, harm. When you include the A, it's the negative. So it just makes the exact opposite of this. So it turns this idea of violence and harm into a positive piece, not a negative piece. So, okay, one more second. So right here, Shanti is a negative piece. So what Shanti means is it's like peace, but it means the absence of violence.
Okay.
Whereas ahimsa means kind of the presence of the opposite. So it's calling for us to be active in our nonviolence, right? And so this is the central principle of Gandhi in the Hindu independence movement, is ahimsa. Like ahimsa and satya, where we are the two foundational principles of Gandhi's theory of change. Gandhi was the most influential thinker on social change for Martin Luther King Jr., right? And both of those figures are the foundational principles for social justice and activism today. And it's all built upon principally ahimsa and secondarily satya. And the idea behind these is that to be acting with ahimsa is you have to be active in it. So not only do you have to divest yourself from harm and from violence, but you have to be actively working to be preventing harm and violence and creating peace and love in society. So for me, I think ahimsa, a practice of ahimsa, is demanding that we are creating this peace and love for others. And again, to go back to my original example, it's like, obviously I'm not going to cut off my own leg and eat it.
Right.
But I'm also not going to let somebody else cut off my leg and eat it. Right? Like, this is my leg and nobody's going to eat my leg.
Yeah.
And as long as we allow other people to eat the legs of other people, it is internally at a very deep level justifying violence, justifying separateness, and contributing to our it makes us buy into this illusion. And it is an illusion of separateness, because like at a very fundamental deep level, right, we are all one. And so yeah, I think for me, mean, yoga, the system of yoga, Patanjali yoga system, is the foundational philosophy of my life. It guides everything I do. And given that ahimsa is the central tenet of it, ahimsa is like the thing that is really intertwined and inspiring what I'm trying to do in this on Earth. I don't know. How's that sitting? Are there other things I can chat about?
That's so beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, that's it.
I'm gonna add one more little spice on top then.
Yeah, please keep spicing it.
All right. So this talks about ahimsa, but you can point to other yamas and niyamas to make the same exact case for veganism, right? So the third yama, asteya, non-stealing, right? And it all points back to ahimsa because theft is a form of violence. But when we drink a cow's milk, or we take a chicken's egg, or we consume a bee's honey, that's an act of theft, right? And again, that's an act of saying, I matter more than you. I'm going to take what's yours for my own pleasure. So even if we're following Asteya, it's calling for us to be vegan. We can't take what's not ours, and the bodies and products of others is not ours. Looking at the second niyama, santosha, this idea of contentment. Right, in the West, the only justification for eating animals and their products, unfortunately, is personal greed. Right, there are examples that we can come up with, like Inuit in the polar region, having to survive by eating animal flesh. Right,
Yeah.
Nobody watching this video has that issue.
Yeah.
Every single person who has an Instagram account and who's watching this can live without eating animals and their products, right?
Absolutely.
And so the very so at that point, the only reason to be eating animals and their products is an act of greed. It's the opposite of contentment. So you can't cultivate this sense of santosha, this sense of contentment, while greedily consuming the bodies and products of others. And so all five of the yamas, all five of the niyamas, because they're all rooted in ahimsa, they all make this case for the need to live compassionately, and on a very basic, to live vegan, in my position, to live activist, to live in a way that's actively working to change it, and that's to be an activist and calling for the liberation of all other beings.
Fuck yeah. I love it. Thank you for that explanation. So will you tell us now, just the last couple minutes, tell us now about the work that you're doing now in the world and how you show up for an activist, and maybe you could share with us like ways for us to get involved, other people to get involved in activism, and maybe too you could start off with like some vegan, like, I don't know how many people on here are not really know the deal about being vegan, or like the stats around, I don't know. So you maybe just, I know you have some really good, facts around what's going on in the world. So maybe just if you can drop into that.
Cool. Thanks, Shar.
Yeah.
I won't bombard people, but I'll spice a little some facts on everybody, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll start with the status quo.
Great.
Within the world, we farm and kill over 70 billion animals a year. Sorry, let me clarify that. 70 billion terrestrial animals, so animals who live on ground. In the US alone, it's 10 billion, right? So a 10 followed by 9 zeros. That's how many animals we are killing every year to consume. When we bring fishes and crustaceans into this picture, that number skyrockets to 3 trillion animals a year.
No.
Right? So 3 trillion animals. And to put that number into perspective,
yeah,
108 billion 108 billion human beings have ever existed. Right? So 108 billion humans have ever lived on Earth. And we are killing levels of magnitude more animals than that every single year to consume them, right? So the scale of violence is really unimaginable, as is the severity of it, right? So anybody who's watched a video on animal exploitation will tell, like, watch like 5 seconds of it,
Yeah.
and the level of violence that is endemic to these sites is astronomical. So not only are we farming and killing hundreds of billions of animals, but each one of those lives is living in the deepest, like with the deepest presence of violence and harm that one can imagine. So, and okay, I don't know how far off to go, but this industrial animal agriculture is the leading cause of so many of the Earth's most pressing environmental issues, right? So a leading, if not the leading cause of climate change, the leading cause of deforestation, the leading cause of ocean dead zones. I mean, the leading cause of bacterial infections and bacterial disease spread, causes pandemics, right? It's the number one source of antimicrobial resistance. According to Human Rights Watch, slaughterhouse workers are the most exploited and the number one source of human rights violations in the country. So really every form of oppression and all these harms in society that are the most salient that we're facing, right? Just take climate change and global pandemics, are deeply, deeply enmeshed within animal agriculture. So even if people don't give a fuck about animals, which I think we should, but if you don't, if all you care about is humans, we need to stop eating animals, and we need to do it immediately. There's no other alternative, right? I mean, we could keep talking about this, and if you're listening to this and you're like, Nico, I cannot get on board, send me a DM, and I'm so happy to chat with you about this. But assuming that we can all agree that it's wrong to be killing and eating animals, for the environment, for our public health, and for human rights, I'm gonna take that as a starting position. Then it comes to be like, all right, well, what can we be doing to address this, right? Because the issue seems so overwhelming. I'm just one person. I can't make a difference. And that's the narrative that folk in power put out, and it's total bullshit, right? Like, that only way anything is ever changed is by groups of individuals coming together and demanding it. We are so much more powerful than any of us can even imagine, and we can create the world we want to live in our generation, right? All it takes is this to transcend the ego, to transcend the individual, come together as a collective, and in that collective we have power to create the world we want to live in. So within the animal rights space, I think it's deeply important. I mean, in every space, no matter what you care about, is to be an activist. And all that means to be an activist is to be active on your beliefs and to be advocating for change, right? So I think the first step, as said, is to stop eating animals and their products. It's easy. You're going to feel great spiritually, mentally, physically. You're going to glow. It's going to be the happiest decision you made of your life. I fucking guarantee it. All right. So once you stop doing that, you're going to find this new energy, this new conviction, this new passion. And it's because once we align our beliefs and our values with our actions, there is tremendous liberation and value in that, right? There's no better feeling to be moving in this world the way we believe we should be, right? And there's no worse feeling than be doing something we know it's wrong. Yeah. We all know it's wrong to contribute to the system, even if it's at a very deep subconscious level. All right, so again, go vegan. It'll be the best decision you've made in your life. It's the best decision I've ever made in my life. Then begin to help others do the same, right? So maybe that's like texting your mom, your boyfriend, I don't know, all these people you talk with on social media, and begin starting conversations. As a part of that, plug into the network, right? There are tens of millions of passionate vegan activists around the world doing incredible things, and it's the most beautiful community. It's a community of people who are actively spending their free time watching like violence, right? And you don't have to do that, but like actively spending their free time to create a more peaceful and just world for others. And those communities are so beautiful. So find the community, It exists where you live, I guarantee it. And if it doesn't, then we can be the community together digitally. Plug into it and start hanging out with them. Activism can take so many different forms. I personally organize with a group called Direct Action Everywhere. But it doesn't, for me, it doesn't really matter the exact form of activism you're taking. It just matters that you're being active. So start with yourself, begin spreading the message to others, whether it's just on sharing some posts online, texting some friends, watching some documentaries. Maybe I'll end with that. 3 documentaries for homework.
Yes.
Dominion.
Give it to him.
It is one of the it is the most important movie, or one of the most important movies I've ever watched. So Dominion, it's free online. Just type in watch Dominion. It's a hard one. It's not like a uplifting Hallmark movie, but it is a movie that will profoundly empower you and change you to see the world differently and to live your values. The other, Cowspiracy, I remember that came out when we were hanging out way back when. It's the best introduction to these environmental issues caused by animal ag. And there's more academic stuff out now, but start there. And then What the Health? It's a documentary that looks at the health consequences of eating animals. So Dominion, Cowspiracy, What the Health. And as soon as you have those 3, this is the last thing I'll do, and then I'll let you get on with your day.
No, please. Keep going.
Those 3 documentaries, like, for anybody who's interested in transitioning to being plant-based or vegan, it can seem daunting at first, and it's understandable, right? Is when you have your why clearly defined, it becomes a breeze, right? When if you don't know really why you're being vegan, like I saw someone post about it somewhere, and like this cute girl I follow on Instagram wrote something about it, and like I should probably do it. Then as soon as like you go out to eat with friends, you're like, fuck, that looks good, I'm gonna eat it, right?
Yeah.
But when you have your why clearly defined, right? And it can be spiritual, it can be philosophical, it can be ethical, it can be so many reasons, all the reasons. But when your why of like, I do not want to harm others, I do not want to contribute to the harm of others, when that why is very clearly defined in your mind, and it will become defined through watching these 3 documentaries, everything else falls into place. And again, it will become an incredibly easy decision and change, but the most empowering, beautiful like choice you've ever made.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love it. It's so beautiful. This is such good information.
I guess if anybody who watches this, if any of y'all have any questions about veganism or animal rights more generally, I love talking to people about it. Just slide into my DMs, and I slide on in. And I really would love to chat with y'all about this, and like support you wherever you are on the journey. Obviously just keep following Shar. She'll steer you correctly as well. But yeah, I mean, hit me up. I'm down to chat, and I'm not just saying that. Awesome. Yo, Master Mello, thanks for the love, Carmelo. I'm glad you tuned in.
Okay, last thing. Does anyone have any questions for Nick? Anyone that's live right now? Anything that's come up for you that you're wondering?
And if not, if you're shy and you don't want to ask right now, slide into my DMs.
If you're shy, he's looking for you to slide into his DMs. So just get in there.
And if you watch this and it's not live, I don't like whenever you end up watching this, hit me up and let's chat. Yo, Javi, thanks, brother. It's good to see you, dog.
Awesome. I feel like we could just keep going on this conversation, because it's such potent and important. This is just such an important topic. Like, this is the topic that like all conversations need to start right here. So I'm really, really grateful for you and your work in this world, and for you've been inspiring me since we first met. And I really am inspired too now to take more, real action. I think that's the next step is like, okay, we're vegan, and now we need to go out and take the action of what does it mean to be a vegan, and how can we like inspire others and put ourselves on the line. And the work that you do and putting yourself on the line is so freaking inspiring. So everyone follow Nick and see what he's up to, and let's
then
all
before
get
we
out
end,
there.
I
Yeah.
saw a little question from Carmelo and a follow-up
Oh,
by
good.
Lauren. Love you too.
Great.
Y'all
Okay.
are both beautiful. All right. How do you handle the vegan hecklers? Right?
Ooh.
Like, how do you handle the haters?
Oh, yeah. Please help us.
So this this question applies to any type of hater out there, right? The thing about veganism is that people take it very personally, right? And so it's like, not by being vegan, you're inherently saying that other people are wrong. And if you're not, then you're not doing it right, right? Like there's, and that's my, it's wrong to eat animals. It's wrong to normalize and justify violence, and we shouldn't tolerate it, right? We don't tolerate violence in other aspects of our life. We don't tolerate racism, sexism, transphobia. We shouldn't tolerate these systems of oppression, and it should be the same for animals, right? But knowing that theoretically is a lot. It can be difficult to put that into place, especially when we're living in a deeply carnist society where living vegan is way outside of it. So, Carmelo, to answer your question, I think live unapologetically, like, peaceful and nonviolent, right? And so it can manifest in very different ways. Like if you're at a protest and someone comes up and gives you shit, I just don't engage with those people, because it's not an appropriate space to engage with them in a nonviolent way. They're not there to listen, and so I just brush them off. Otherwise, I do so. I acknowledge where they are, right? And so if they're coming at me with pure hate and they're not open to a conversation, I shut them down. They don't deserve my attention. They don't deserve your attention. And the most peaceful way to engage with them is just to let that shit dissipate. If they're coming at you with questions and you think they could be interested in hearing, I try to approach everybody how I wish I would have been approached the day before I went vegan, right? So people who I try to give people, like everybody, because I lived the first 18 years of my life eating all the animal products I get my hands on. So I try to engage with everybody who actually wants to engage with a deep level of compassion and love, recognize that I was there, see myself in their shoes. Again, it comes back to the foundational part of this talk. It's like the other is you, I am them, they are me. So recognize that they're on their own journey, give them some help and like some inspiration for where they are, and then help them along the way. So haters who are hating just to hate, I just say fuck off, but I say it nicely. I say, like, I love you. I hope you have a beautiful day, things like that. Go eat some fruit. And then people who are coming at me and are actually interested, I take as much time, patience, and compassion as I can, and to meet them where they're at and help them get to where they want to go.
Awesome.
And last thing, I keep on saying last thing. Again, living passionately and openly anti-speciesist, vegan, in a deeply speciesist, like carnist world is fucking exhausting and draining, right? It's hard. And it's so important to find a community of people who love and support what you're doing. So go online. Vegans and animal rights activists are going to be so fucking excited to have you on board. Find those friends, build that community, and create safe spaces where you can live your values in a way that is like uplifting and inspiring, so that when you go out into the world, it's a jungle out there, you can keep living authentically you. Right. Love you, Shar.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Nick. You're an angel.
I'm glad we did this. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah.
And it's been way too long. I hope we can see each other in person soon.
I would really love that as well. All right, so I'm gonna post this video when it's over, and I'm gonna put some notes in the post. And if anyone has any questions or anything, again, please message Nick. He's looking for you to slide into his DMs.
Always. Shar, I love you. Love everybody who's watching this.
I love everyone that's watching this as well.
Y'all are all beautiful. And again, let's create the world we want to live in. We can do it.
Yes, amazing. Thank you, Nick. Much love.
See you.
Bye.